good. Okay. I was waiting for the marquee lights, but that's okay. I'd like to call the meeting to order of the City of Monona Plan Commission, Monday, August 14th, 2023. Would you please call the roll?
Chair Moore.
Here.
Alder DePula.
Here.
Mr. Homburg.
Here.
Mr. Stein.
Here.
Ms. Fox.
Here.
Mr. Chapman.
Here.
And I'm not seeing Ms. Fallett yet. Mr. Grice is excused.
Great. Thank you. With that, I'd like to move, like a motion to approve the minutes of July 10th, 2023. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second? Second. Any changes, corrections, additions to the minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion, minutes carry. Thank you. There's really no need this evening to change the order of business, so we'll move to number 5, appearances. And I'm not seeing anyone in the room, but I understand, Doug, that we have some people online as well as a public comment. Yep.
And I think everybody would be attached to item 6A in the public hearing.
Okay.
I'm not sure if there's any other business.
Okay. Is there anybody here that is here for something other than the unfinished business this evening? If so, please raise your hand. Not seeing anybody. Okay. That being the case, we'll close the appearance section and go to unfinished business. And number 6A, the public hearing for Compass Properties on the request for consideration of a precise implementation plan for the site located at approximately 4601 to 4613 Monona Drive between Springhaven and Dean Avenue for a mixed-use development, case number 2-016-2021. So with that, the floor is yours first. And then after you go ahead and present, we'll go ahead and take anyone who's interested in making an appearance during the public hearing. So go ahead, you guys. Introduce yourselves.
Thanks. Thank you. Matt Murtos here with Compass Properties. Been working on this development quite some time, and at the last meeting we were given approval to our revised GDP with some conditions of approval, which we believe that to the best of our ability we've achieved. The first, I'll just kind of go over the conditions and what we did to address those. So the first one being the green space. Our previous plan was short of the required 30% green space for the site. So we really dug in and reviewed how we were going to address that and found kind of some redundant concrete areas and sidewalks, which we eliminated, and really tightened up sidewalks throughout the site. We believe that any further reduction in sidewalks would negatively impact the pedestrian experience and access to the site. But after doing all that, we still were just a tad bit short, and we did end up removing 5 parking stalls that are on the southwest end of the site, and we're kind of strategically selected to improve circulation on the site and then also provide more of a park-like setting experience near the sidewalk there along Gordon. So a total of 5 parking stalls were removed in this version, and the result was that we did achieve the 30% green space on the site. The second condition being enhanced building articulation. To do this, we did review and really think more about the comments that we received at the last meeting and discussion that we had about adding a pass-through on the building, and we did find that adding it between the resident fitness amenity and the BMO Harris space actually worked out well for the site and allows people visiting this, accessing the site by car, access to walk through and reach the ATM, which is outside along Monona Drive for BMO space. And it would also allow residents maybe entering the site on bike to come through and enter the bike room that's on the west side of the building. So in addition to adding some articulation and distinguishing the commercial and residential space a little more, it did serve a functional purpose for the site. And additionally, kind of visually, we added some of the natural wood paneling to accent the kind of white cement siding, fiber cement cladding, and that's kind of seen throughout the site now. And we also added the increased setback on the Gordon Avenue side on the 4th floor terraces, an additional 2 feet for a total of 9 feet now. And you also see that there's kind of some pergola terraces on those top floors to kind of add a little more visual articulation to the building. And then commercial space was another point that condition to be met, and we did add back in a business incubator space that's next to the cafe co-working, just shy of 800 square feet. And we see this being a lower cost, smaller space for some of the smaller businesses that had previously occupied this location. And we kind of see it being either 3 or 4 smaller spaces that could be rented on a shorter term basis and at a lower cost. And they still have, the ability to have this visibility and great location here along Monona Drive. And it would kind of also be designed in a way that if it didn't really take off, it could be converted to more of a traditional retail use in the future. But we'd like to try this business incubator model first. I think, this summarizes the big changes here that we made and how we addressed the conditions from the last meeting.
Thank you, Matt. Is there anyone else that wants to speak during the public hearing portion from your group here? Or you'll have opportunities to get into more detail, obviously, in the next.
Matt Frydock, I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to add.
Yeah, not too much. I think one thing we want to try to do with this submittal was to provide a little bit more information on some of the cladding and materials. There was some discussion in the last meeting about that. So we've included another page in the document set that had a kind of a blown up elevation that you could see some of the material colors and selections that are made, as well as a page with some example photos of, actual materials. In addition, we put in some preliminary light fixture selections for the site, a mix of, pedestrian scale poles and wall sconce type lighting. Again, pretty small scale stuff. We don't want to overlight it, but we want to have enough coverage for safety. So we wanted to kind of start to indicate, some potential, locations and types of lighting for that. And then I think the only other kind of supplemental documents that we've included in this submittal was a first pass of some of the civil with JT. I think Dylan's in the room there that he can comment on that. And then we have first pass at some preliminary landscaping with Olson Toon on the call here that they can, answer any questions you may have on that.
Okay, thank you, Matt. With that, I'm going to open it up to those people that would like to appear, since this is the public hearing portion of this particular proposal. So, Doug, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you. I first will share some written correspondence that we received, and then open it up to one of the members one of the participants, that had registered to speak as well. So, the first was a contact form that was received from Curtis Riles at 5209 Midmore Road. And the message of this was writing in full support of the Bloom project. It recognized the need in Monona for market rate apartments, which would ease the housing supply shortage in the county, therefore making other units more affordable. Given its proximity to one of Monona's main thoroughfares as well, suggested that the site is perfect for development and would like to see the project move forward. And the next person would be Christy Goforth, who would also like to speak on this.
Okay. Christy? You know the drill. Even though we're out of the appearance section, if you could limit your remarks to 3 minutes, that would be great.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. I apologize. My dog is barking at the moment. So hopefully you can hear me okay. Christy Goforth, I live on Gordon Avenue.
Yeah, hang
as
on
a
one second,
resident,
Christy. We're gonna turn up the volume, so hopefully get more volume from you and less volume from the dog.
How about if someone wants to go before me, I can put him in his crate, and that would solve that measure too.
Okay.
If you'd-
We can do that. Yep. Is he good? Yeah, we can do that. We'll. Is there anyone else on here besides Christy online that would like to speak during the public hearing portion of this, or in the room? Nicole, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Could you just state your
So-
full name and then also where you reside?
Sure, my full name is Nicole Gruder. I'm at 4603 Shore Acres Road, just a few blocks down from the corner of Monona and Dean. And I know that there's lots of issues that are being contended with this as far as like market value, whatever. There's lots of things that are going to be addressed, I think, by Christy and others. But my main concern is the aesthetics of it. When I saw the rendering of it, I just couldn't even believe that this was the same project that's being proposed up the road. I just find it to be really out of scale and out of character for the neighborhood, and it just worries me that there's this huge wall of concrete that's just quite jarring looking, in my opinion. It seems to be, I'm not sure if it's even being considered. I know that these plans have been drawn up many times. It just really feels, I don't know, just jarring is the word that keeps coming to my mind. It's just like this wall of concrete that doesn't have any architectural nuance or breathing room. And anyway, so there's that. And then I also am very concerned about how there's two ways to get to this complex, and it's all both on Monona Drive, one way down Monona Drive or the other way down Monona Drive. And there's not really any side streets or shortcuts to get to it. And it's already a bottlenecked area. And these issues have been brought up in the past. These side streets that you can kind of get around don't really, they're teeming with pedestrians and bicyclists. And anyway, it's an area that's already struggling with traffic, and it really concerns me. It just seems like this is a project better suited for other areas around here, Sun Prairie, Fitchburg, or the west side, where there's more of an expanse of land. That's not the case in Monona. And lastly, I just don't feel like anybody in the area could even afford to live in these apartments, and that they're apartments and not condos. I don't understand that either. But anyway, yeah, I'm not anticipating any diversity of any sort, whether it be racial, class, or profession. But mostly the aesthetic is it's just this wall of concrete that just doesn't match the rest of the neighborhood whatsoever, and it's I don't know, it's not going to be pleasant to look at, in my opinion. So that's it from me.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for coming. Christy?
Great. Thanks so much for accommodating my pet. As a resident on the block of Gordon Avenue, adjacent to where this project is planned, I'd like to share that our block is highly diverse and made up of primarily low to moderate income homeowners. There are several households that are members of underserved populations. Our homes are the largest investments we own and will likely ever own. I'd also like to state that I'm not anti-housing, anti-development, or anti-density, so you can put those thoughts to rest. It's clear that we need more housing, especially housing that's affordable for low to moderate income folks, and options that allow for affordable ownership. I am, however, anti-gentrification and anti-displacement. People who once lived in Monona have shared their traumatic stories with me about the displacement they faced. Monona has had a pretty horrific history of displacing people, poverty, and that is a fact. Garden Circle, the trailer park, and now potentially the 4 residents who live across the street from me. Putting in a 98-unit luxury apartment complex in a low to moderate income neighborhood is gentrification by definition. Being virtually across the street from a public school where many working class people work is a major missed opportunity in this walkable neighborhood. 7 blocks of our neighborhood are fully parked Monday through Friday, September through early June. So parking is already a serious concern. These are young and inexperienced drivers. Adding an additional 100 cars to this area with a seriously flawed intersection is highly questionable. Requiring students to walk across the 4-lane county highway at rush hour is dangerous. We all know and we've experienced that traffic violations have increased significantly since the pandemic. Monona PD is doing an excellent job policing our streets, but half of this street falls under Madison jurisdiction, which we can't control. The misalignment of Spring Haven and Monona Drive with the entrance to Rocky Rococo's is the intersection I'm referring to. It creates near misses daily. I have a direct view of this intersection from my living room window. They may not be generating police calls, but they are happening. The parking area of the laundromat is not deep enough, so people loading their laundry are standing in the street. It's unsafe and it's poorly designed. If this PIP is approved, I'd like to see a few things happen. Close Spring Haven Avenue as a through street. Retractable bollards at the west end of Spring Haven could be installed as a safety measure. The street is not well designed, and adding 19 parking stalls on this street is hard to imagine given the parking issues that already exist there for the businesses and residents. Require the school district to develop a parking plan for high school students. Reinstate the townhomes or some type of buffer zone for the single family homes that are across the streets. Not requiring this, which was a really big sticking point in the past, will instate a questionable precedent for future developments. Develop an anti-displacement policy so marginalized people in Monona don't have to fear being forcibly removed from their homes as more apartment developments arise, and develop a parking permit system for the homeowners on the street, because we already do struggle to park on our street, and this is going to increase dramatically. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Chrissy. Who else would, perhaps is online, who would like to speak, if anyone? I know there's a few other names. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand. Okay, not seeing anyone else online. Again, that would like to speak. Is there anyone here that would like to speak during this public hearing portion? Okay, hearing none, we will close the public hearing portion of this meeting tonight and move to number 6B, pre-hearing conference for Compass Properties on request for consideration of a precise implementation plan, PIP, for the site located approximately 4601 to 4613 Monona Drive between Spring Haven and Dean Avenue for a mixed-use development, case number 2-016-2021. Doug?
Thank you. So the project here this evening is the proposed demolition of the existing buildings and the construction of a 4-story mixed-use development along Monona Drive. The 2.2-acre site is bound by Spring Haven to the north, Monona Drive to the east, Gordon Avenue to the west, and West Dean Avenue to the south. The plans include 4-story mixed-use building with 98 market-rate apartments and just under 7,500 square feet of dedicated ground floor commercial space, including the BMO Harris Bank, as well as a business incubator. A total of 164 parking stalls spread across underground and at-grade stalls, as well as some sustainable building elements and site elements, including solar, green roofs, EV charging. The project has an approved general development plan, GDP, as well as a tax increment financing development agreement from the Monona City Council. There was a change of ownership that was discussed at the last meeting that this came forward in, whereby Compass Properties are now leading this. As mentioned, there were some revisions to the approved general development plan, which were approved with conditions, which I will move on to. The parcels themselves were zoned retail business, but the applicant did receive approval to change that to rezone that to the community design district, which allows for this planned community development PCD approach, which gives greater flexibility and the ability to look at this in a more holistic way. When determining the compliance with the approved general development plan, At the most recent meeting, the Plan Commission approved the plans with a number of conditions. These will be referenced throughout, but as the applicant had said, this included the increased site open green space to meet the city standards of 30%, 3-0, without the loss of parking, the enhanced articulation of the building, as well as additional commercial space being included. Moving on, the certified survey map, just as note, that was previously approved as part of the previous plans. That had a 2-lot certified survey map. That will most likely need to be revised as part of any next steps as part of this PIP, which the applicant is aware of. Moving on to the site design and lot coverage, there are now just under 29,000 square feet of open space at grade, which is right on the 30%, and it's an increase of over 2,500 square feet from the last meeting. The sheet C100 in the packet shows the areas of open space, all those that are covered, and in order to meet that 30%, it did include the removal of 5 parking stalls, totaling just over 800 square feet at grade as well. The applicant included some details that does help with site circulation as well as the buffer along the west side of the site, but certainly something for the Commission to discuss. In addition, the larger tree islands were discussed and possible deviation from the code that would typically require those every 12 stalls. There was some discussion from the Commission to possibly consolidate those, have larger islands less frequently, which would allow for more canopy trees and things like that. So the revised plans do now include 14 stalls before a tree island, but it does allow for larger islands themselves. One point of clarification as well is the plans do show the setbacks, the minimum setbacks of 14 feet along the north, east, and south property lines. Those are shown on the plans. They were not included in the previous submittal, and does show sort of the established setback line as it relates to the buildings to the north across the street there as well. The parking standards, the applicant proposes a total of 164 stalls on the site. 75 of those would be surface stalls, including a zip car, as well as 89 underground stalls. 19 of those surface stalls are directly off of Springhaven, offering direct access into the retail at that corner, and are in a very similar treatment to those that exist today. The applicant does seek minor relief from the city parking standards, which would require a total of 172 stalls. So the net of 8 there, that it would be 8 stalls short, with 5 of those coming from the open space concession there to meet the open space standards. In order to meet some of those needs for additional transportation, the zip car has been mentioned, and that was discussed during the GDP process with both this and the previous applicant. Additionally, there are extensive bike parking facilities shown both in the public and private portions of the building. That includes a bike room within the building for the tenants, as well as bike racks, both in front of the retail spaces, but also in the pedestrian walkway as well. The Commission may choose to discuss the commercial standards for the parking here. 25 of these stalls of the 172 would be required by the commercial uses, and that includes 17 of those would be for the BMO Harris Bank use, which would typically be a Monday to Friday, pretty limited opening hours. And again, weighing up some of the alternative transportation options as well. In terms of the architecture and massing, a couple of the balconies were relocated from the original plans to the revision that was received here. That includes a couple facing Gordon Avenue that have been added to just add to the building face there on the southwest side. And additionally, the pedestrian walkway was included. This is closest to the BMO Harris Bank, so a little further south than had first been proposed, but does offer that access in between the building a little closer, given the building does take up the entire block. So I think a couple discussion items here would probably be some of the lighting, possible landscaping options, as well as just general access for that. Certainly in discussion, city staff was discussing kind of the windows and some of the screening and things like that in the walkway, how lighting can help with that and make it an inviting space that's of course safe, but also usable for everybody as well. As mentioned, the setbacks of the building, the roof line on the 4th floor have been increased an additional 2 feet, so the balconies are now 9 feet deep, moving that massing further towards Monona Drive and away from Gordon Avenue, and as mentioned, there are a couple pergolas as well up there, offering some differentiation, some shade, and different materials again to vary that. Additionally, there was some natural wood tone siding added to break up some of the western facade and add some more detail and sort of contrast there as well. A lighting plan is included, and as mentioned, that includes the bollards and the pole lighting as well. The color temperatures were included in the specifications that were within the materials, and that may be something the Commission chooses at this juncture to discuss with the applicants in advance of a formal consideration. And additionally, the landscaping plan is included. The landscaping, as has previously been mentioned, the points are based upon the parking that is required for the site, and the applicant did, as part of their scoring, use the 172 stalls that would be required by code, not the 164 that they are using. They meet both the canopy trees as well as the points and exceed the points that are needed. This includes 12 canopy trees along Gordon Avenue, assisting with some of the buffering there, as well as the berms that are proposed there, in addition to some of the stormwater ponds and treatment areas. So that's certainly something recommended for discussion this evening, is the species, the sort of interactions there with the intense use of the site, but also the ability there for screening, for the intention there to offer that buffer to Gordon Avenue. Finally, the signage is a point of discussion as well. Not directly linked to the PIP, but certainly something, the renderings now include a lot more detail on the BMO inclusion there, and just something for discussion as it may impact certainly, the building facade and some of those things. So something the Commission may choose to just give some informal feedback on it at this point as well. And that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Would anyone from Compass like to say anything else about in the pre-hearing conference before we open it up for questions about any elements as described in the public hearing? Or since you have your whole crew here, I just didn't know if you're all here to respond or if there's something in particular you would like to.
I have no additional comments.
Okay, great. With that, I'm going to open it up to the Commission then, and we'll start on left side of the room and work my way around. Chris, would you like to start?
Okay. Thanks. I'm going to start with a list of all the things I like that you did. I do like the walkthrough. I know when you're looking at the side of that building, it's still, I agree with the speaker, it's a lot of building. Actually, I should address that first because we had some people speak. I know Nicole spoke about the mass of it. Unfortunately, there's an approved GDP to change the mass now. We don't have that ability. We've approved a GDP that allows them by right to develop within the scope of that GDP, and that GDP was pretty clear on this massing. So that would have had to have been a conversation we had months, if not years before this. I just so you understand that the general development plan is what sets out the parameters for the size of the building, the scope of what it is, a general layout of the division between commercial and rental units, and how many there's going to be, parking. All those things are handled in the GDP. So for tonight, with the PIP, that stands for Precise Implementation Plan, what we will be looking at is the details. The civil, I mean, there's a bevy of details to look at yet, but certainly massing of the building is one we can look at. And as far as traffic, we actually had a traffic study on this, was it a year ago? Maybe a little more? And so we've gone through that, and we're comfortable with where we're at. And in fact, when we cite something like this, we prefer to have it on a major road or a major artery like it is. That as far as planning goes, that's where we want to put a building like this. And when you look at traffic counts, I know it doesn't seem possible, but a lot of times the commercial buildings that were there will have higher traffic counts than a larger apartment building. There's generally aren't that many people coming and going. That's what the traffic study told us. And the other, Christy, I know you came and spoke, and again, we appreciate anybody that comes and helps us think about more things, because Lord knows we can use the help. we aren't, as far as adding the stalls to Spring Haven, we're adding some, but there is that type of parking right now, which has functioned there for quite a while. So I guess your comment would be, is there going to be more traffic, so it's harder for that traffic to function? And again, we're not sure there is. I'm not sure that if I'm probably, I don't think like younger people, but I wouldn't go out to where there's no stoplight. I would go out there to the stoplight and get on, especially if I want to take a right. But I sure wouldn't try to take a left from there. So I believe the traffic study again confirmed that most people that have that maneuver to go left on Monona Drive, I will say exiting this property, would probably come and take the stoplight. I'm sure some people it won't, so there'll be some aggressive drivers that try to go through there. But again, it's been functioning that way between this and the laundromat across the road. It's been functioning for a long time. We have experience with it. So I feel pretty good, and other than the people that front right on those stalls, I don't think those will be the first stalls that anybody uses. I think those will be the last ones. So sorry, but I wanted just some response to what we're thinking as a commission as to what some of the comments were. So back to the massing. I look a lot at the street level, and I know some people might think it's silly, but for me, to have that break in the street level helps a little bit. So I do appreciate your rethinking about that, and looks like you'll be able to get some efficiencies on the site by doing it as far as some of the things you want to do. So I'm glad that worked out. We had a little more detailing on this where I could see a little more, I could actually see the brick and what you were doing down on the ground level and a few things, and I do like the detailing and everything you've done there. Like the patios on Monona Drive, we've talked about that before, but it, again, adds a lot to the ground level and what people see as they drive by this, because when people drive by, most people, they won't be looking up 4 stories, they're going to be looking at where their eye hits. So all that helps a lot. I saw you're using utility brick, totally agree with that, because for so much brick and such a big face, that larger brick will look just fine on there. Love the addition of the business incubator. We've talked about that. The neighborhood's talked about that. The neighborhood's talked about some of these areas where it's nice to get the neighborhood businesses somewhere to start and a little more affordable rent. And that you've responded to that, I think, is great. And that you're acknowledging that we're going to have a little better rents on this space and just try to have something for people that want to get a leg up that can't afford a lot. I think it's awesome on your part. I like the setback from Gordon with a little bigger patio. I think that's a great amenity. We talk about that all the time. When you build an apartment building, we want to see things that'll make it somewhere you want to be 5 years from now and 10 years from now, because everybody wants to be in a new building, and the more you can put in there for amenities for the residents, the more success you're going to have. And the larger islands along Gordon, I know you weren't here, Rob, but we asked, there were some pretty narrow islands, so instead of doing that, we asked us, we said, let's go 14 stalls. We have some nice big islands where you can really do something landscape-wise, and I love that. I think we'll be able to have a lot more attractive building there. I had another question I was going to ask before I got on my roll. Did the council act on this, on the GDP?
Yes, it's been approved.
And did they change anything when they took their action on the GDP?
No.
So it's been passed just the way it was passed here at Planning
Correct.
Commission? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you. Did I hear you do have a civil here tonight?
Yep.
Civil engineering?
Yes.
Great. What are your thoughts about where you're going to get your water quality? Because I didn't see much on there. I see a couple bio basins. You think you can do the whole site there, or you're going to be underground?
No, our attempt is going to be doing everything at surface with bioinfiltration. I'm pretty optimistic that we can meet that with the way it lays out. We're not adding a lot of impervious area to the site, so most of our TSS reduction is going to be at 40% versus the 80%. So I'm pretty confident. We ran some preliminary numbers and things look good.
Because the ones we've seen before were all underground and pretty substantial underground to be able to hit it.
Yeah, and I mean, because this site was pretty paved, or
Yeah, how much was
impervious.
covered before? What compared to now? You've got, I'd say, 70%, right?
So existing impervious is 57.6%.
Yeah, okay.
So
So as far as volume control, you only have that little
yeah, we're
increment?
actually reducing, for volume control, we're actually reducing the rates based on the existing condition. So,
Okay, and so we'll want to talk about those in a little bit, or I guess talk about them right now. So your bio basins are going to be taking quite a bit of water, right?
Yep.
To get your 40%, there's a lot of area here. So we need to reflect that in our landscaping plan too, what's going on and what can be there and what's going to live around that. And I know one of your biobasins is in the back near the neighborhood, and of course we wanted to berm up or have something around. So again, with the landscape plan, let's just make sure when it comes back that we've got some good screening on the edge of it, and we can still get some, decent trees in around it too. They can be up on the upper areas, but it'll limit some of the species you want to have around it for sure. We don't have a lot of civil information in our plan set right now. So it's hard to comment on a lot of. I know you've probably got it figured out up here, but there's not a lot for me to look at and comment on. But I do think eliminating a couple stalls by Dean Avenue was a good thing, because we don't want people backing right out into somebody pulling in or pulling out. So I think that actually, as you said in your report, reduces the clutter for the traffic right there. So I think that's great. Why are you taking out the sidewalk along Monona Drive and Dean Avenue?
It's just like the section by the BMO space.
Well, what it looks like, it's all of it when I looked at the plan. It's the whole run along there. Looks like the only thing staying is the section by BMO. If you look at C100, all the sidewalk on Monona Drive is being replaced. Almost all the sidewalk on Dean Avenue is being replaced.
So our thought there is that that's likely going to get damaged during construction, so we're just showing it as being replaced in kind.
Okay, I'd like to share a different thought.
Okay.
When we rebuilt Monona Drive, we were adamant about landscaping, and it's, as you know, on Monona Drive, it's a really, really narrow terrace. So there's structured soil under each one of those trees, and I don't remember the exact detail. I don't know if you know it, Rob, but I'm sure the city would have the old plans, but it was like almost plastic grating and boxes that went together with a special soil in there so that the trees would have room to be able to spread their roots and grow. And as you see, the trees along Monona Drive are really nice, but it also had enough structure that it could hold up the sidewalk. So I would hate to see that all disturbed, because most of that structure is underneath the sidewalk. If you look at that, I don't think we put any of that under the curb and gutter. So if you go and disturb that sidewalk, you're disturbing all that structured soil that was put in for all those terrace trees. So it would be great if we could build this, and you've got a minimum of 14 feet all the way around it. And I don't think, especially on Monona Drive, I don't think you'll be getting permits to shut off a lane or to have forklifts out there forking material in and out. My guess is you're going to have to build that from the ends. So I think if we could eliminate certainly Monona Drive, replacing any sidewalk, and again along Dean, the same thing. Do you notice how those three trees that are there are in really great shape? Look at that terrace. It probably isn't that wide. Well, a tree would never grow that well on a terrace like that. It's that structured soil underneath it. So it would be nice if we could keep all that stuff the way it is. And again, you're way back from Dean Avenue. You're even further. The only closest point you are is right at Monona Drive. So it seems like you could build this without doing that. And if you talk about that in your proposal and your specs and tell people to leave it undisturbed, if a few stones get cracked during construction, they can be replaced later. If they know they can tear it out and just start ripping that up, then all that stuff is going to be disturbed. Plus, it saves you some money. But I think you could build it. I can't speak for Public Works. I don't know who chairs Public Works, but I have not seen a time where we'll close down a lane of Monona Drive to allow somebody to build a building. Are you Public Works, Patrick? I'm just not aware of. Oh, you're Public Works.
No, we both.
Oh, you both are. Well, we got them here. Are you aware of any time we've allowed shutting down a lane of Monona Drive to build a building?
No.
And it's also a county highway. So
Yeah.
not only we'd have to do it, but the county would. I don't see that happening. So at that point, what's nice is when you put your construction fence up is to keep it inside that sidewalk and just keep people off it. It also allows us pedestrian traffic to go up and down there. And the same way on Dean Avenue, if we can keep that open, it allows, because we have a school there. There's a lot of kids that use these sidewalks. So it'd be nice for that reason too.
Yeah.
To keep both those sidewalks open if we can. Well, I'm on sidewalks. Doug, you had a mention in there that sidewalks are being built in the right of way, so we might need an agreement. I think I understand you're tempted to be the opposite thing. Is when you build them in the right of way, you of course have to build them to city specifications, and they're in our right of way. We control them. Either one east-west sidewalk over by Spring Haven. If that's going to be the main sidewalk, we'd have to have some kind of agreement that the public can go east-west on that main sidewalk, nowhere
Yeah,
else.
and-
And that'll be a negotiation, because I know you looked at me right away, but there's also going to be a negotiation for those stalls that are in the right-of-way. So I would think that would all be wrapped up into the same thing, because you want to build some stalls out into the right-of-way, and you got a sidewalk. To accommodate this project, we allowed some things we don't always do, but there'll have to be some kind of agreement for that parking, too.
Was that agreement already done with the GDP?
It's being discussed.
Okay.
I want to say it was either the CSM or the GDP. It's being,
Right, well, and there's also some stuff in the title work that we have to
Okay.
work through with Attorney Cole when we get to that point. So
Right.
there's some stuff out
Right.
there that relates to that issue that we'll definitely
Right.
make sure gets
So-
cleaned
so
up
all-
and done appropriately.
Yeah, and all I'm saying is we just keep an item there that, that we just work together, because we're allowing all that parking in the right of way. I know it's there right now, but it's still, that was over 50 years ago, I'm going to guess. Because, and it's a long time, as long as I've been here. And there probably was nothing memorialized back then. So I'm sure everybody on both sides will want to memorialize that. Electrical, you said we have an electrical plan. We have cutouts,
We
cut
don't,
sheets.
there's no.
I didn't think so.
metrics.
When you said that, I started reviewing all my plans. I don't see one.
I'm sorry, I meant specs.
Oh, just the cutout sheets. So,
Yes.
so all we can really talk about is cutout sheets. Love having some bollards around there and lighting. The one thing I would mention on electrical is the last project that came when we did look at the PIP. We certainly don't want a lot of light to escape your project, but there were some pretty main drive areas that were down to 0.1 foot candles. I mean, it was not well enough lit for something with that many people. So we just want to hit a balance between overlighting and underlighting. There were a couple areas there, so careful not to have any overlighting. There was a couple areas that had virtually no lighting right in the main drive. So just keep that in mind when you do your electrical plan. Bike spaces, we talked about them, but we talked before, but I don't remember, it was your project or the one before. You also have bike racks available for all the people in the underground parking areas in front of all the cars?
We have the bike crew on grade, and then, Matt, are you planning to have the bike racks?
We can do that. We've done that in the past on projects, but yeah, as of right now, we've got the bike room on the first floor. Because a lot of times it's easier for people to get the bikes in and out of there rather than, either having to go down the drive ramp or go through an elevator. So we try to get them on the first floor a lot of times.
And that's fine. It will be available for people if they want to get a bike rack in front of their cars, because some people might want to have it in the, I don't know how it's going to go. Probably won't be enough spots for all of them anyway. I assume it'll be available then, something like that, bike rack ahead of your car, your parking stall.
Yeah, certainly something we can do.
Okay, it's just something that triggered there. So let's talk about the green space just a little bit, and this will be a night of mixed messages. The green space is important, right? But so is this being a successful project, and everybody, both sides want it to be successful, right? So if you talked about, well, you had to take a little bit off a patio here and there. To me, if there's a couple patio areas or something where, man, if you could just have a little more room, it would work. And you came back, and I can't speak for the rest of the commission, but you were 29.23% open space, but it made a big difference to your project. I would be in favor of that. So to me, it's the goal. We want to hit it. You come back and say, man, if I could have a little bigger patio here by the cafe, that would really allow me to actually functionally have seats and tables out here instead of being so narrow that a server couldn't get by or whatever is going to happen. I just take a look at that.
Okay.
Because at least for one person, I'm sure the others will speak to it later, that would be I think that would, if we can make it better, we should make it better right now. One negative, you have beautiful renderings, and they have beautiful terrace trees all along Gordon, and your landscape plan doesn't have any terrace trees, so we need to add terrace trees on Gordon. You've got them on your property, but there's no terrace trees on the in the right-of-way between the sidewalk and the curb. And if you want to know how important that is, just look at your own renderings and how that looks. It looks really nice, whoever did those renderings. I wrote too small for me to be able to read it. One comment, I'm sure Rob will have a lot of comments on the landscaping, but your evergreen trees are mostly like arborvitae and a tall juniper. I don't know if there's an area, but it would be nice if we get a substantial evergreen in there, and maybe Rob will tell me I'm nuts, but like a spruce or something that just has some mass. They look so nice in the wintertime when everything else, the leaves have fallen. You've got a couple substantial trees. That's a nice look, so that'd be a comment on the landscape plan. Give me a second, I gotta get my reader so I can't read my own writing. Other on the landscaping, we talked when you first came that this is a really prominent corner, and we'd like to go beyond minimums with landscaping on this site. Now, you have a really nice landscape plan, and what I'm looking at in areas to enhance, really the Gordon Avenue for me is one of the biggest areas. But the other thing I guess I'll just say to the rest of the commission is there's a lot of landscaping on this plan that we don't give points for, because if I read it right, pretty much all of the ornamental grasses and perennials don't give you any points, but they're all in there. Am I reading that right? Anybody for landscaping here tonight?
Yeah, he is. He's on the. Excuse me, you can go ahead and respond. Olson? Is it Olson? I think you're muted. Would you like Chris to ask the question again? Or did you hear it? Can't hear. Sorry, can't hear you.
Okay, how about this? It doesn't have to be answered, but it's something I'm bringing up. I
Yeah.
believe the way I'm reading this is all the ornamental grasses and perennials, most of them aren't accounted for in the solution, which we don't have a solution for in our ordinance. But when you see that, and there's substantial grasses and things there, and we don't give credit certainly for the biobasins, those plantings are part of the biobasin, but there are other plantings, grasses, ornamentals that really enhance the site, and to me that makes a big difference. So for me, that's part of making it more than just a minimum, is to have those. And again, at ground level, that's where you get the most value out of it. So I really like that. And I'm going to probably find something on my writing here that I missed, but that's good for me for now. How's that?
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. So I'm going to continue on my left, and I believe the next one up is Rob Stein.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
First off, Chris, you look lonely over there on the right side of the room.
He said you look lonely on the other on the other
I'm
side.
doing good, thanks.
Going back to a couple of things that Chris had talked about. As far as those structured soil and the terrace that was a part of the Monona Drive reconstruction, Chris hit it right. I haven't seen the detail, but if it's structured soil, it's most likely, if you can imagine, milk crates kind of stacked on each other like Legos. That gives the soil the structure, and then it doesn't get compacted. Another thing to consider that you want to stay out of there, if you can, is that they will run utility or electrical conduit through those soil cells as well. So you could really be opening up a Pandora's box if you start digging into those structured soils, assuming that's what it is. And it would be terribly expensive. So I apologize I wasn't able to make the last meeting here, but I did watch it a couple of times, and I understand that the GDP was approved with conditions, and what we have before us is what we had before us, and it's quite a bit different in my mind from what was originally proposed. That said, looking at the architecture of the building, I think it looks fine. I think it looks very standard for most housing mixed-use developments that I see in Dane County. And for the record, I was disappointed to see the change in the aesthetics of the building and the overall site plan. But moving forward and trying to make the best of what we have, I think that building looks okay. One thing, looking at the site plan, it'd be nice to have some dimensions on this, and I know this is a pre-hearing conference, but when we look at the site plan and we're evaluating things for flow and function and things like that, knowing what the distance is between the drive aisles, the parking lots, the sidewalks, that pedestrian passage, that helps a lot, and materials are kind of lacking in that department. Looking at some of the pedestrian circulation, I don't see any truncated domes anywhere on the site, especially where the sidewalks lead into drive aisles and parking lot areas. That's something to look at that stuck out. Regarding the lighting, I just saw the cut sheets there. It looks like what you put in there, and maybe it's just preliminary, but you have a square standard for the lighting plan, or for the kind of area lighting, and then rounds for the bollards. I think there's lots of options of family of lights to make the project kind of look a little more, put it into a family, so the lighting standards kind of relate to one another instead of having a square of one and a round of another. Had a comment about the bike park spacing. Again, I'm not sure. On the northeast side, where there's some by the patio, it looks like it's pressed up against the landscape bed there, but kind of hard to tell how far that is, so maybe look at some of that spacing. I like the addition of the pergolas up on the top on the west side of the buildings. And then moving into the landscape plan. General comments is that, what we had seen before in kind of concept development was a landscape approach that was heavily native. There's a number of non-native selections in here. And the biggest difference, I think, is the use of landscape communities versus kind of on-center spacing of, one shrub here, 5 feet, one shrub here, mulch in between approach. Personally, I think landscaping with a native palette in a landscape community is, better for a number of reasons, but I think it's ultimately aesthetically better, and long-term can be less maintenance than having these one-off plants of non-native species that have to get, small engines to mow them and mulch or trim them. So I think as you kind of develop this landscape plan, I think there's opportunities to kind of have more landscape communities versus kind of one-off plants. Talking about the Gordon Avenue landscaping plan, I caught the same thing that Chris said. When you're looking into these bioretention, these BMP areas, you show a lot of intense landscaping on the southeast corner. It looks like you've got a pretty severe grade going into that biobasin, which is also something to consider along the sidewalk side, so that we don't have a sharp drop off leading right off the sidewalk there. So you have a lot of service period kind of by front entrances on the west side of the building there. That might be okay if they have enough breathing room there, but oftentimes you can have issues with berries dropping and then treading into your new building too. Yeah, I did have a comment about having larger coniferous trees, spruce, pine trees, especially on Gordon. I think the neighbors would probably appreciate having a more four-season interest and screening opportunity there. I saw that there was a call-out for cobblestone drainage swales. I'm not sure exactly how that functions. Maybe someone can comment on that if their audio is working.
Does anybody want to comment on those swales that Rob just, I don't know if that's, again, Olson, I believe, can we hear you now? Do you know if you've got your sound fixed?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. What was the cobble question?
We have a call out for 3 to 6 inch cobblestone drainage swales, and you show one along Gordon Avenue as well as on Dean and on the southwest east corner of Monona Drive.
That was an infiltration swale that was on the civil plan, so we were reacting to that and dressing up the areas around the swale. The bottom of the swale essentially it helps for maintenance. That's the short answer.
Okay. Well, that is kind of a really prominent, especially on Monona Drive and Dean. And I think it warrants kind of the best aesthetic treatment possible.
That essentially is what it is. It's down in the bottom of a swale, so you won't even see it from the street. There's native plants all the way around all of those swales. And I wanted to comment on your thoughts on the ornamental grasses and perennials are, other than 1 or 2, are all native. So that's where the communities are coming in. Butterfly weed, the sedges, the black-eyed Susans, prairie dropseed, the little blue stem. That's really what we were shooting for along there, was to really soften that and have lower maintenance grasses and perennials along there, which, to the other person's point, don't necessarily have register for the point system for Monona, but we really wanted to promote that.
Yeah, and I did notice that. There's a couple of things in there, daylilies and hostas, and well, you know the ones. But and to the point of the point system, in my mind, when I look at a landscape plan, if it's thoughtfully landscaped with perennials and grasses, that's good for me. I don't know why our ordinance is like that, but it is. But we've made exceptions in the past and credit. Yeah. So I applaud the use of a lot of those.
And point taken on the Gordon Avenue side, if spruces and pines are preferable, those can be easily placed in there for some additional height and width. We were going mostly for volume at that point, because there were a lot of parking stalls and we wanted to make sure we had enough points. But we can certainly do that.
It's a long area, and I think there's room for both. So I think a nice mix would be a good solution there.
Anything else, Rob?
Oh, we made those. Sorry, I'm going through my notes here. We made those parking lot islands much larger, and we put 2 canopy trees in, which are good, but didn't improve any other landscaping underneath those, which I think was part of the discussion based on what I had listened to at the last meeting. So maybe there's some opportunity there as well.
So just adding understory in those parking lot islands?
Yeah, I think there's opportunity there.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's green lawn at this juncture, but we can certainly fill that up with plantings.
The area, this is more of a civil site design question. The area where you have accessible parking by the bank drive-through area there, is that going to be a flush sidewalk, or is that going to be a ramp area to the accessible parking?
That's going to be it's going to be a ramp up, is the plan right now.
So that's going to be like a thickened edge walk to those other parking stalls?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to pass the baton now, and I'll chime in if I have more to say.
Okay. Great, thank you. Corey?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
All right. Well, I first want to just highlight that I was pleased to see the things that we talked about at the last meeting, in particular that the business incubator space is back in here. Really pleased about that. And I also think that the way that you have made some changes to the appearance of the building, that's really nice. I like the addition of the wood grain panels. So I think that looks nice. And let's see. I guess just a question in response to Christie's comment too about Spring Haven. Christy, were you suggesting that it be blocked as a through street to get from Monona Drive to Gordon? Okay.
The west end.
Okay. I guess I was thinking, kind of to your point, Chris, most people aren't going to be turning left there, and I do understand your concern, Christy. But is that a place where we could have it be a right turn only? Is that something that that we would be able to ask the city to do, so that there wouldn't be a backup of traffic there if people are trying to turn left, and there wouldn't be people shooting out into the intersection? So that might be something for us just to talk about. Not us, but the city to talk about. I think the landscaping looks good based on with the comments that Rob had made. The biggest question that I had about that was related to the berms. And we do ask that headlights be shielded when they're facing a residential area. And so I just wasn't sure that, in looking at this, you have there's juniper and there's the, let's see, the ginkgos, and I don't think those would shield, because the berm is to the, like there's a berm and then it looks like there's not a berm and then a berm. So there's kind of an undulation of the berms, and I just wanted to make sure that there's going to be enough screening of the headlights that are parking in that parking lot, so that they're not shooting into the homes of the residents on Gordon Avenue.
We can certainly beef that up along the back of the curb. You just need to, I guess, be careful of bumper overhang, right?
Yeah. I just want to have some attention paid to that, I guess. So I think that's important. I mean, I do think the berms, they'll be there in the winter, as opposed to, depending, like if it's grass and stuff, that can get weighed down by snow. So I think there's some good things about that. With respect to the garden area, is that just going to be I saw you have grass seed as how that's going to be established. Is it just going to be a grassy lawn? Or is there going to be some other things that are done within that garden space?
Yeah, we're still planning on having some form of a community garden in that space, but also planning to have some of it be open area and for grilling and gathering.
Oh, okay, all right. Oh, and then my final question is with the. Never mind. I see it now. Never mind. All right, I'm good. I think it looks good. And I'm pleased that you did take into consideration the comments that we had at our last meeting.
Thank you, Cory. Susan Fox?
I don't have a whole lot to add to this. I was very pleased to see how well you responded to the comments raised at the last meeting. I think the ideas are good. I had questioned the point of a breezeway last time, and now that I see it, I kind of like that idea. I think it works well. I don't have concerns about the removal of 5 parking spaces because, again, I think what we have is sufficient. A side comment, just because it's come up a couple times, the city does not have the authority to require the school district to come up with a parking plan. That's not likely to happen. But I think, I think given the traffic study, I also think it's important, the idea you raised, Cory, of looking at maybe a right-hand turn only on Spring Haven, might be a good idea. I think that might be a public works question. I like the setbacks, like the larger tree islands. I think that's great. I do think that the idea that was raised tonight about having a few larger evergreens along Gordon Avenue would be good. I don't want to lose the other canopy trees that you have though, so a mix would be nice. And then considering whether you could add some other trees along the terrace, as Chris mentioned, I think is worthwhile. I also like the idea of a bike room on the first floor. I don't know what, how much it would add to the cost to add bike racks in front of each parking space, but having some down there might be a good idea. The e-bike charging is going to be in the bike room, I think, correct? I think that's...
Yeah, we'll have some there for the tenants and then some public in the breezeway also.
Okay, yeah, that breezeway, that would be helpful too. I appreciate also the additional green space. I would agree with Chris's comment that if you have to lose a little bit of that to make a patio that's more functional near the cafe, that would be okay. Not a lot, but not a lot of green space, but being lost. But I also think that the lighting, the color of the lighting seems appropriate for this type of project. In terms of some 4000K color as well as the 2700. And I also appreciate Corey's last comment about just being thoughtful about the screening of headlights. You do have a lot there, and it's possible that some of those native plants that you have, the grasses and things, some of those will be a little taller too. That might help with that. I also, just in terms of your future thought, even though it's not on for tonight, about signage, the kind of the signage that was sketched in here to the visuals looked good, so I look forward to seeing what you come up with that, but it looked appropriate from what I can see here. And I appreciate seeing the solar panels and, that your commitment to the green sustainability effort of Monona. So I don't think I have anything else. I'm really pleased with it. I was also initially disappointed to see the change in design, but I do like the changes that you've made. I think adding the wood tone does help and a little more masonry, so I'm good with it.
Thank you, Susan. Now I'm going to actually ask our newest commission member to jump in, but before he jumps in, if you would, John, introduce yourself and give us just a little flavor of your background.
So I'm Joe Chapman. I'm a Monona resident, obviously. I also serve on the Landmarks Commission, and we don't have fancy signs with our names on it. Landmarks Commission. I am an architect in town. I manage our firm's office, our Madison office, down off of State Street. So,
and where in Monona do you live? Without giving your exact address, just what street, just to give people. Then how many years?
How many rooms?
No. How many years have you lived in Monona?
Oh, I think we're on approximately our 5th year. I live on Tonya, Washington. Is that how you say it?
Yep.
So,
okay. Right,
and I don't have the benefit of the previous meeting, so I don't know if you've improved anything or not. But I believe the people have stated their opinions. I am very familiar with the previous design, though, sort of the fantasy, I would call it, and met with those folks a couple of times and reviewed that project. So, and wondered how those numbers would work. So, I do have some comments that were questions. Actually, will the parking be signed? Like, will there be, signs for commercial spaces versus residential spaces, or how will that be? How are you going to segregate the parking, or will you?
The BMO Harris will certainly have some reserved parking on near their space, and then we plan to have some surface spaces will be reserved for tenants, but I don't think we're planning to have any of the spots along Spring Haven sign days, some set aside for commercial, but haven't gotten too down into exactly what each space how they'll be assigned or designated.
Okay. There are 2 exit stairs from the housing component that drop down into the sort of courtyard area. I assume you're exiting people at grade in case of emergency?
Yes.
There don't appear to be any sidewalks coming from those stairs, and so I'm not sure how people safely get away from the building. And I don't know if those sidewalks would impact your green space requirement. Might want to look at that.
Yeah, we can address that.
And I don't think you can exit under a building either, like an outdoor overhang. So you might want to look at flipping those to the outside of the building. But I won't play architect. The walkway, there appears to be like a walkway that ramps up next to the ramp that goes down into the parking. Is that correct?
Yes.
And there's like solid walls on both sides of that walkway. How wide is that walkway? Do you know? 6 feet? Because that's where bikes are going to come down, right, and up as people are going up and down. And there appears to be some type of mesh material on top of the wall. Can you describe what that will be?
In concept in the mall right now, we're anticipating having some grade change there and sloping, which we're obviously still working through the civil. But yes, I mean, the intent was to have some level of kind of concrete retaining wall, to give kind of the lower portion of that a little bit more protection, then do a more open railing above it, so it's not just a big concrete retaining, guardrail.
Okay. It won't be chain link.
No.
Okay. There's, on one site plan, there's a dog run designated on 8.1. Will that be fenced? The renderings don't kind of illustrate that.
I think we're still working through design there. I mean, both the garden and the dog run, that's an area we're still working through as far as exactly everything that's going in there.
Okay. And then trash not only would bikes come down that walkway, but it appears as though trash would come down that walkway and then go across a couple of aisles to the trash area that's outside?
Typically what we've been seeing on these is that, on trash day, the bins are pulled out and kind of stacked on the edge for pickup, and then they get pushed back in. I think we're going to have to still work through that with the operations and their service provider for that.
There's a trash area and there's an equipment area underneath.
That's intended specifically for BMO to give them a dedicated space for any of their outdoor mechanical equipment and outdoor trash needs.
Okay.
That would all be kind of, partially enclosed.
Enclosed with what? The renderings didn't really illustrate anything.
Yeah, I think for the trash, we'd want to do some screening. For the mechanical, it's likely going to need to have open air, so it might be more of a mesh screen so that we can allow the open air, but give them security of their equipment as needed.
Any concern with noise from that mechanical equipment on the residences on Gordon?
I think from Gordon, we'll be fairly screened with that, but that's something we'll keep in mind and try to get some barrier if we can.
Okay. Apparently you changed to wood siding. Do you have any maintenance concerns about wood siding on a project like this?
Right now, we're anticipating fiber cement cladding for most of the kind of lap siding that you're seeing.
Okay. So it will all be fiber cement?
That's the plan right now. Yep.
Okay, great. And my last comment will be, while I think the business incubator and co-working spaces are great concepts, I wish you the best of luck in renting those.
Thanks.
That's all.
Great, thank you, John. Patrick?
Thank you. Just wanted to, because this has been going on for 2 years, just wanted to give a little bit of project background because I keep hearing some comments about how the city could do better. And I just wanted to just make a comment that the city isn't in the business of selling real estate. This is a private transaction between two entities, the owners that own those lots and the developer that is purchasing these lots from those owners. The city didn't go to the developers and say, hey, we want you to come build this property. So I just want to just reiterate that that element of control is not part of the city's jurisdiction in this situation. And it's our job to determine if this development is in line with what the city standards are. So I just wanted to clear that up in case anyone's concerned. There was also a comment about maybe there could be condos there. But again, that's kind of it's really dependent upon the developer, a developer, to bring that idea to a particular project, and then that would come to the Plan Commission just like everything else. And the same tools that are available to developers to build apartments would be there potentially to do that with condos. But again, the city doesn't develop condos. I wanted to also mention something about displacement. Again, it's a private transaction between two private entities, and the city doesn't have the responsibility to rehome at the city's expense or a taxpayer expense someone who may be displaced in an apartment, especially if that apartment is not, that has not shown up in the past on assessors with assessors data. So that would be something that potentially the sellers of the property could think of, because they are receiving a substantial sum to do that, and they could potentially do that to the residents that live in their buildings. Again, I wanted to mention Springhaven and traffic. I talked to the police chief, and in the last 5 years, there's been one accident on Springhaven, and that involved a car backing into a sign. And those were the only incidents on Springhaven in the last 5 years. As far as parking goes, I met with city staff last week as the chair of Public Works to talk about permitted parking in that particular area for residents. So that's going to come up on the Public Works agenda in September. And we're going to start talking about that. At least we're going to have a discussion about that and how to manage the traffic in that regard. Also, the comments about the right turn lane, I think that's a pretty good idea, and I would definitely put that on the agenda for Public Works as well. I think that's a good idea for right turn only there. The biz incubator space, I like. It's something that I spoke about now, what was it, almost 2 years ago when I was first on the committee. One of the first things that I think I ever mentioned on the commission with that project, so I'm glad to see that that's back, and I think it's useful. Wanted to ask about, well, just as a concept, I wanted to ask the developer about blue roofs in general. Have you, during this project at all, have you considered the idea of a blue roof as part of the stormwater, blue roof as far as the stormwater management goes at all? Is that something that at all is something to consider? Yeah.
We haven't really talked about that. In our experience doing them, the loads on a wood frame building would be pretty prohibitive. We've done them before, but they've been on concrete structures where you can handle that amount of kind of water retention as a cistern.
Gotcha. Just curious because it's a relatively small parcel. So, but thank you for that. Like everyone else said, I don't really have much more to add. I think a lot of it has been covered so far. I think that that you've come back to us with a lot of the things that we were looking for, and I appreciate that. And I think that that's all I have. Oh, one more thing, lighting temperature. In the project, I guess my only suggestion would be to try and keep the lighting temperature at 3,000 K and below, to have it look warm and inviting, instead of going up to that 40 K that I think was listed. I think that's, I think more people should think about that.
Agreed, and the listings on the cut sheets were just the available options, not necessarily the selection yet. We typically go 2,700K or 3,000K depending on the application.
Awesome, that's good to hear. Thank you.
Chris would be very proud of you. Chris, too, would be very proud of you for bringing up the lighting temperature. You know, that was kind of his thing when he shot plan. Thank you, Patrick. Rob, back to you.
Thank you. There's one other thing I wanted to bring up that seems kind of odd to me, and maybe there's explanation, but along Gordon Avenue, there's 2 concrete areas that are called out as seating areas, and I question whether those are worth having there. I'm not sure who those are supposed to serve, and where we're trying to get as much green space as we can. I don't know. Maybe other people on the commission would think differently, but I don't know. I don't know who those are for.
I guess it's just kind of to contribute to pedestrian experience walking down Gordon Avenue, kind of give it more of a park-like feel.
Those came from some early conversations with, city staff Doug and others, and, the idea was to give people a reason to potentially occupy that buffer zone that we're creating there. But, I don't disagree with your comment that you could have additional landscape there when that would give us more screening. So.
I'd vote for that personally, but if someone else on the planning commission thinks differently, speak up, I suppose.
Corey.
I have I mean, I don't know how many other people would do this, but I was thinking the same thing, like who's going to use those, and so I was trying to think of like how that might work. Let's say you're on the east side, and you're getting that morning sun in your apartment, and you want to sit outside for a little bit. Maybe you would go downstairs and sit on the bench. But that's why I was also asking about what's happening in the garden space, because if there's some things right now it's just grass, but if there's some seating areas that have shade in the garden space, I could see moving to the garden space to do that. But, if somebody wanted to sit outside in the shade, where would they do that? And so I saw those seating areas along the sidewalk as a space for someone to go and have, a chance to be outside.
Right. Thank you. I just want to mention a couple of things. One was a question, one was a comment. There was a comment made from Compass that there may be screening around trash receptacles and there may be screening around equipment. And I will tell you, there will be screening around both of those, or there should be screening around both of those when you come back with a PIP. We have a, as Doug, I'm sure, has shared already, or if he hasn't, he would before we see a PIP, more detailed PIP, we would expect screening on both of those. It's in our ordinances. Second, one thing that did come up at the last review that I'm seeing in the drawings again that I think we were kind of struggling with a little bit was the small fencing in the front is kind of an aesthetic. And I know, well, I won't weigh in. But since nobody happened to mention it, I'm just wondering where people are sitting with that, because we did talk about it, I think, last time. And I think actually what people said was that they kind of liked it too, but it's not part of our, it's allowed technically by ordinance. So I don't know if people have a different viewpoint. Chris,
Sure.
Where are you sitting on that one?
Well, number one, first comment on the screening, and it needs to match the building materials too.
Yeah.
Second comment on the fencing, that was one of my notes I couldn't read. I have two of them here, I thought. I just want to say we don't have, it doesn't meet our ordinance, but everybody thought it looked good, and everybody last time said, I like some way to do this, so as long as it's very ornamental and landscaped well, it's
Right.
something we could give an exception for. We could approve it, because we have 14 plus feet in there to be able to do something. I think it looks nice to have something other than a few shrubs, to have a little seating area, patio area, and designate it with that and put some shrubs. I think it's a great idea. So we just have to do it. Again, I mentioned last time too, a couple more brick pillars wouldn't hurt in there somewhere too. If you look at Fairway Glen, they use some of those, and it looks really nice. It just gives it, a I guess, a pedestrian scale along Monona Drive. And then the last one of my notes that I couldn't read and nobody talked about it was your signage, and I guess I have a couple questions on it. I see signage on almost every corner, and I see a lot of blue. BMO's allowed one landscape ground sign. So what are the two on Springhaven intended to be? Because I know you've got a landscape ground sign for the residential, you've got a landscape ground sign shown for BMO, but over on Springhaven, you got a couple of them. In fact, there'd have to be an agreement because they're both in the right-of-way, too.
I think BMO has some preferences for some wayfinding type signage. I think that's what their intent was for some of those. Granted, we are not kind of doing signage for them, so I think we're just trying to represent some of the initial information. They'll obviously have to come through with that and go through the process with you guys on that.
Okay, that's a great answer, because I saw the blue and I thought, oh boy. But if it's wayfaring, we do allow, I think, 4 square feet of wayfaring, and what is it, 2 or 3 feet high?
Up to 4.
Up to 4. So something similar was shown there, a maximum of 4 square feet on the signage and 4 foot tall. We could allow for wayfaring signage. It is right now shown in the right-of-way. If there's a way to pull that out of the right-of-way, that would be nice, and I think there's room there to do that. As far as the rest of the signage, it's what we saw last time we saw this project. We all looked at it. I think we were all relieved that it had been scaled back. I think it's the maximum we'd like to see, and from what I've heard, it's the minimum BMO wants to see, so I think that's pretty much where it's at. But the wayfaring would be allowed.
Great. I actually have another question then around the sign, around the fencing. Do you recall what the height of that fencing is intended to be in the drawing?
42.
Along Monona Drive for the terraces?
Yeah.
I mean, the intent is that it's a landscape kind of decorative style fence, so, maybe it's like 30 inches or something like that. It's low scale. It's really to kind of give a little bit of a layer of separation from the sidewalk.
Okay. So that being the case, would there be any value, and maybe it would make snow plowing or other impossible, but I'm just going to toss it out there. Would there be any value from a berming and screening standpoint to the houses across the street, headlights, to add a similar type screen along the parking lot edge before you hit the berm and the landscaping? Would that have any added value aesthetically or otherwise? To cut down on glare?
You mean the landscaping or the fence?
The fence. To add a fence, it's all the way around, it's pretty much a
The fence is
along
decorative. The fence, the headlights go right through the fence.
Well, it would still break up the headlights, so a combination of the landscaping and the fencing, I just wondered if that adds enough more screening.
I think the landscaping helps a ton. I don't know.
Okay.
Again, there's going to be other opinions, but I think having that fencing right where these patios are, where people are active up by the building, that makes some sense. I think it would be a little odd to have a fence way out by Gordon Avenue. Okay. That's just decorative.
Okay. Anybody else have an opinion on that? You guys? Oh, Rob.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I don't think it would add a lot of benefit to put it along Gordon. I think that can be treated with landscape. I was going to also make a point, maybe it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyways, is that as far as that fence along Monona Drive goes, I think it adds something, and I think it could be a real nice kind of feature along there. But just ensuring that it is commercial material and commercial installation so that it doesn't get bent and twisted the first winter it sees would be my biggest concern. Yeah. So making sure that's specified a stout fence.
Okay. Terrific. Thank you, Rob. Any other comments from the commission members? Hearing none, my question then to the applicant. Do you feel you have a clear sense of direction from here from the commission members, or are there places where you feel like I don't know where you want us to go. Do you want us to go this way or that way? Is it clear to you? Because we're happy to try to clarify if there's anything that didn't make sense to you that you heard tonight.
Yeah, I have a good understanding, but I'll let our architect and everyone else get a chance to answer that question as well.
Okay.
I think we're good on the architectural side. I think you guys have outlined the areas where maybe we had a little bit of wiggle room. Obviously, the 30% threshold was one that we were wrestling with. So I think if you guys have given us a little flexibility there to not have it be a detriment to kind of the use of the site. I think that's a big help for us, and so I think we've got some clarity there.
Great.
On the civil side, I think we're good.
Civil side, good. Landscaping?
I think we're good. We'll take those comments to heart. Thank you. One question on that side along Gordon Avenue, the street tree spacing. Who determines that? What's preferred for species, things like that? Who should we chat with about that?
And that's specifically for within the right-of-way, is that correct?
Terrace. On the terrace, correct, yes.
So the city, in the Public Works Department, we do have certified arborists, so I can reach out and put you guys in contact for species and sort of suggested layout and things like that.
Perfect, thank you.
Anything else before we close the pre-hearing conference? Thank you all, learned people, for your feedback this evening from the commission, and thank you again, you guys, for being so responsive. Compass for being responsive to our feedback, the last feedback that we got. We really appreciate it. And with that, we will close number 6B. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your time and feedback.
With that, I'm going to move to 7, new business, of which there's none. So we will move to number 8. Reports of staff and commission members, staff report regarding status of development project proposals, economic development, etc.
Thank you. The economic development update, pleased to say that the CDA reviewed both development agreements for both the North Point workforce housing project as well as the Whitehorse private drive, and they did approve both of those, recommend both of those to City Council, and so that already had its first read a week ago today, so that will be coming back to Council for formal consideration next week on the 21st of August. They are certainly looking to break ground soon, make the most of the dry and the good weather before the winter comes. So they are.
You only got almost 2 inches of rain.
I use dry loosely, I guess, after today. But generally, much better weather, and they're looking to get in and do some foundational work before the freeze, I guess. So that's an update on those 2 elements and that main project there. In terms of the upcoming Plan Commission items, we do have a zoning permit that's come through that will be on for the next meeting, August 28th, and that is for the space adjacent to the Floor and Decor, the former Shopko site, and so it would be taking up to the remainder of that space. They're looking, I believe, they're targeting, I have both signage as well as zoning permit for that, so I believe that's the meeting they're targeting. I just need confirmation there, but it would be a pet store retailer that would be going in there. And I believe that, I understand there would be another zoning permit as well that would be looking to come in, and I think that's down at River Place. I have it in my inbox, I just need to go through it and detail that as well. So we are expecting a meeting, a couple zoning permits, and I think there are some signage applications as well that are moving forward for that August 28th meeting.
Thank you. Any updates, discussion on diversity, equity, inclusion efforts?
Nothing from staff. I don't know if you wanted to reference the housing meeting. Would that be inappropriate?
The housing meeting that we had?
Yes.
Yeah. So, as I'm sure you all know, we have a new city administrator here in Monona, and as we all know, workforce housing and affordable housing has been in discussion in this community for quite some time. We had an initial meeting among a small number of us just to talk about sort of map a plan forward to try to facilitate the addition of some affordable housing in a smart way, and the first step in that process actually is going to be for Doug and the new city administrator to sit down and look at what makes the most sense for us as it relates to access to new funding that's available at the state level. And then we'll go from there. But I think it was a productive meeting, and a very productive meeting, and look forward to seeing what Doug and the new city administrator are putting together, as well as some other things. And in that context, we also talked about sort of timeline as we're inching up to 2026, which would sunset our current comprehensive plan.
Wouldn't sunset, it's just we would be in violation of updating it every 10 years.
Right.
It would still be in effect.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you for that clarification. But basically, it ends, and we need to, by regulation, we need to have another one put together. So we talked about, since that is a task that this body is charged with, we talked about the potential timeline as well in terms of how that fits into any kind of new strategic housing plan and other elements that probably need a bigger refresher, and kind of chicken and egg, what should go first and by whom, and the resources that might be required because 24 is going to be here, and it's a long, for those people that have been here through a comprehensive plan before, that it's a fairly long and involved process, and should be 2 years exactly. So exactly. So we got to. Basically, the message was we got to get on it. Let's get a timeline together there too. So anyway, that's a brief update there.
Thank you. And I can just add as well,
Yeah.
from an additional element I know it being discussed in the past, I am planning, based on council agenda workload, to be bringing the housing discussion, the document that I believe came before Plan Commission early to mid-May, the snapshot, sort of the demographic information. To bring that to council for discussion. Presentation and discussion next week.
Next week.
Yeah, as long as the agenda workload works, then that will be there.
Great. I don't think there's anything on sustainability. And you've already talked about the upcoming meetings. Any Plan Commission requests for information from staff? Everybody good?
Mm-hmm.
Chris?
Have we heard any update on the EV charging station at Menards?
The update is there's no update. I did check in with them as I was as we were moving through the summer, trying to plan out agendas, and I believe that site is on hold at this point. But they have the feedback that they will be and would be ready for a formal consideration. Assuming plans are substantially similar to what was put forward. But as I understand, they have a lot of sites across the country and priority. So no update there, but certainly keeping an eye.
Things just got kind of quiet.
Yeah. Any other requests of Doug? Hearing none. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thanks very much all. Corey, Susan, Rob, thanks for zooming in.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for letting us zoom in.
Nice to meet you.